Hey there, welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today, we're taking a trip to the Philippines, but not for the beaches or the food. You're interested in their criminal law system, right? And you've even got your hands on some real court documents. Talk about commitment. So buckle up, because we're about to unpack some fascinating cases, from kidnapping to online extortion to even how cultural traditions play into legal decisions. We've got it all.
What's really fascinating about these cases, though, is that they show us more than just the law on paper. We're going to see how it plays out in messy, real-life situations, with all their twists and turns.
Okay, I'm all about messy in real life, so let's get into it. I see we're starting with People v. John Dela Reyes, a case about serious illegal detention. Sounds intense.
It is, and it's a great example for understanding how a crime is actually proven in the Philippines. You see, it's not enough to just say, hey, this person did something bad. The prosecution has to prove specific elements, kind of like building a house, brick by brick.
So it's like a legal checklist they have to tick off.
Exactly. In this case, for example, it had to be proven that De Los Reyes was a private citizen, not a police officer acting in his duty, that he actually detained someone against their will, that this detention was illegal, and that there were aggravating circumstances.
Aggravating circumstances? What does that even mean?
Think of it as factors that make the crime more serious. In this case, the victim was a 15-year-old boy involved in, of all things, a fraternity initiation gone wrong, since he was a minor. That automatically makes the crime more serious in the eyes of the law.
Okay, so minors get more protection, which makes sense. But a fraternity initiation? That's wild. You'd think in this day and age.
It really highlights how these legal issues can crop up in unexpected places, and it goes to show that sometimes even traditions need a closer look. But that's a discussion for another time. For now, let's move on to a case that might hit a little closer to home, for anyone who's ever sent a risky text message.
Ooh, I think I know where you're going with this. Is it the one about the photos?
You got it. Axel Tria v. People. This guy was convicted of robbery. Not for holding up a bank or anything, but for threatening to post nude photos of someone online if they didn't pay up.
Wait, seriously, robbery? I would have thought that was blackmail. Isn't that more about, like, secrets and reputation?
Well, right, it does feel more like blackmail. But here's where it gets interesting. The court decided to classify it as robbery because of the element of threat. They basically said that in the digital age. The fear of having your private photos exposed online is a very real and powerful form of coercion, just as scary as a physical threat.
Whoa. So it's like the law is trying to catch up with how we live our lives online.
Exactly. And this case might be the tip of the iceberg. Think about it. We're constantly sharing personal information online. If threatening with photos is robbery, what about all those online scams? Where does the law draw the line? This case could have huge implications for how future online offenses are categorized.
That's kind of mind-blowing. It makes you think twice about what you put out there.
Oh.
Okay, so we've gone from physical detention to digital threats. What's next?
Let's shift gears to a case that, unfortunately, reveals a darker side of human nature. This one's a tough one. It involves a mother who was charged with qualified trafficking in persons for forcing her daughter into marriage for exploitation.
Oh, wow. That's just awful. I can't imagine exploiting your own child like that. What makes it qualified trafficking, though?
It basically means there are factors that make it even more serious. In this case, it's the fact that the victim was a minor and that the exploitation was for the purpose of forced marriage. This carries much heavier penalties than regular trafficking because of the vulnerability of the victim and the violation of trust involved.
It's heartbreaking, really. You think about all the news about trafficking rings and smuggling, but to think it can happen within a family.
It's a stark reminder that these crimes can happen anywhere, even in the supposed safety of our own homes. It shows the complexity of these issues and how the law tries to grapple with them.
Okay, well, after that heavy case, maybe something a little less emotionally charged.
Actually, this next one is quite a twist. Remember how we were talking about the law applying equally to everyone? Well, in the case of People v. Rico Valdelin, we see how things can get complicated when it comes to power and money.
Ooh, do tell. Who is this Valdelin guy?
He was involved in selling waste oil at a power plant, but there were accusations of shady dealings and violations of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, or RA 3019 for short.
RA 3019, what's that?
It's basically a law designed to prevent corruption in government. Think bribery,
Hmm.
using your position for personal gain, that sort of thing. Anyway, in this case, they thought Valdellan was up to no good. But get this, he was acquitted.
Whoa, hold on. Acquitted. So they couldn't prove he was corrupt, even though it sounded shady?
Exactly. And that's because of this little thing called the burden of proof. In simpler terms, it means the prosecution has to provide enough evidence to convince the court that someone is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
So even if it looks suspicious, it's not enough to just say, he probably did it.
Nope. They need hard evidence. And in this case, the court decided that while there might have been some procedural irregularities, there wasn't enough proof to say Valdellan acted with bad faith or intentionally tried to cheat the system.
So he got off on a technicality?
Not exactly. It's more about the legal principle that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. It's a safeguard to protect people from being wrongly convicted, but it also shows how difficult it can be to prove corruption, especially when powerful people are involved.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So we've got illegal detention, online threats, trafficking, and now high-level corruption. What else have you got for me?
Well, this next case takes us on a bit of a cultural journey.
Ooh, I love a good journey. Where are we headed?
This time, we're heading to the mountains of Mindoro, where two Iraya-Mangyan men were accused of illegal logging. It's the case of People v. Sama, and it's a prime example of how the law sometimes has to navigate the tricky terrain where traditional practices meet modern regulations.
Okay, so we're talking indigenous communities and their relationship with the land, right? I'm guessing things aren't always black and white here?
You're absolutely right. The Iraya-Mangyan have lived in those mountains for generations, and their way of life is deeply connected to the forest. They rely on it for food, shelter, and medicine. So when these two men were caught cutting down trees without a permit, it raised a lot of questions about how to apply the law in a way that respects their cultural identity.
So it's not as simple as just saying you can't cut down trees without permission.
Not at all. The court had to consider whether these men were truly harming the environment or simply practicing their traditional way of life. Remember, indigenous communities often have their own sustainable practices for managing resources that have been passed down for centuries.
That's so interesting. It's like two different sets of rules clashing, the written law of the land and the unwritten laws of tradition.
Exactly. And it highlights the need for judges to be sensitive to these nuances, especially when dealing with indigenous communities. This case actually spurred some important discussions about incorporating traditional knowledge into environmental policies.
Wow. So this one case could potentially have a ripple effect on how the Philippines approaches environmental law. That's huge. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. Hit me with it.
All right, but brace yourself. This one's a real heartbreaker. Remember the trafficking case we talked about earlier, the one with the mother forcing her daughter into marriage?
Yeah, how could I forget? It was just horrible.
Well, this case, People v. Nunez, sheds light on another aspect of trafficking, specifically the exploitation of minors. And it's a stark reminder that these crimes can take many forms, from forced labor to sex trafficking. In this case, a young girl was tricked into leaving her home with promises of a better life, only to be forced into prostitution.
Ugh, that's just sickening. It makes me so angry that these things happen. And it makes you wonder, how can we possibly stop this?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But this case highlights the need for increased awareness, stricter law enforcement, and support systems for victims.
Yeah. It feels like we need to attack it from all angles. Prevention, prosecution, and protection.
Exactly. Okay, ready for another twist? Remember the Valdellan case? Where he
Yeah.
was acquitted of corruption.
Yeah. The one with the waste oil. It felt like he got away with it, even if it was kind of shady.
Yeah. Let's look at People v. Crisologo, another case involving RA 30 Series 19, that anti-graft law. This time, we've got government officials undervaluing aircraft spare parts, leading to a huge loss of money for the government, and guess what? This time, there's a conviction.
Whoa, really? So sometimes they do catch the bad guys.
They do. This case shows that while proving corruption can be tough, it's not impossible.
Yeah.
When there's clear evidence of intentional wrongdoing and a deliberate attempt to defraud the government, the law can and does hold people accountable, even those in positions of power.
That's reassuring, at least. It shows the system can work, even if it's not perfect. So we've got a conviction in one corruption case, but an acquittal in another. What's the difference here?
It all comes down to the strength of the evidence and the ability of the prosecution to prove their case. In the Valdellan case, they couldn't definitively show that he acted with malicious intent, but in the Crisologo case, the evidence was much stronger. clearly demonstrating a deliberate act of corruption.
So it's not just about having laws on the books, it's about making sure they're enforced properly and that there are consequences for breaking them.
Absolutely. And these cases demonstrate the importance of a robust and independent judicial system, one that's capable of holding people accountable, regardless of their status or connections. Speaking of holding people accountable,
Uh-oh. I have a feeling you're going to bring up that trafficking case again.
you know me too well. But this time, I want to highlight a different angle. Remember we talked about how the law is always evolving? Well, the case of Candy v. People, also involving qualified trafficking, took place before a key legal amendment that really changed the game when it came to punishing traffickers.
Okay, I'm all ears. What was the amendment all about?
Before this amendment, the penalties for trafficking were much lighter. But with this change, the government really cracked down, increasing prison sentences and fines, and making it clear that this crime wouldn't be tolerated.
So even though those involving Candy people were found guilty, they might have gotten off easier than if the crime happened later.
Exactly. This case is like a time capsule, showing us how the law has progressed to better protect victims and deter traffickers. It's a good reminder that justice isn't static. It's constantly striving to be more effective and more responsive to the needs of society.
It's actually kind of hopeful, in a way. It shows that things can change for the better, even if it takes time. But man, these trafficking cases, they're rough.
I know, they're tough to stomach. But they're also a powerful reminder of why we need laws in the first place. To protect the vulnerable and hold those who harm others accountable for their actions.
Okay, deep breath. What else do we have on this whirlwind tour of Philippine criminal law?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. We've seen how the law grapples with digital crime, cultural nuances, corruption, and the horrific reality of trafficking. And we've seen how these cases, while unique in their details, all contribute to a broader understanding of how the Philippines strives for justice.
It's been quite a journey. From the mountains of Mindoro to the complexities of the digital world, we've really gotten a glimpse into the heart of the Philippine legal system.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these Philippine court cases, what stands out to you the most? What's the biggest takeaway here?
You know, for me, it's the way these cases reveal a society in transition. The Philippines is grappling with age-old problems like corruption and poverty, while also navigating the uncharted waters of the digital age. And the legal system is right there in the thick of it, trying to adapt and evolve to address these challenges.
It's like the law is a mirror, reflecting back the changes happening in society. We see it in how they're dealing with online crime, in the recognition of indigenous rights, in the fight against trafficking. It's all connected.
Exactly. And what I find most fascinating is how these cases often force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. They challenge our assumptions about justice, fairness, and accountability.
Like in that case where the guy was acquitted of corruption, even though it seemed shady, it made me question whether powerful people can really be held accountable.
It's a valid question, and one that many Filipinos are asking themselves. But then we saw a conviction in another corruption case, which shows that the system can't work, even if it's not perfect. These cases highlight the ongoing struggle for transparency and accountability in the Philippines.
And what about that case with the Arayamanian men and the logging? It made me realize that what we consider illegal isn't always so clear-cut, especially when it comes to cultural traditions.
It's a great example of how the law is starting to recognize the importance of indigenous knowledge and practices. And it raises all sorts of questions about how to balance development with environmental protection and cultural preservation.
It's like there's this constant push and pull between tradition and modernity, between individual rights and the needs of society. And the law is trying to find that sweet spot where everyone's interests are considered.
And that's what makes these cases so fascinating, right? They're not just about legal technicalities. They're about real people's lives, about the values we hold dear, and about the kind of society we want to create.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen the good, the bad, and the downright heartbreaking. But if we had to leave our listener with one final thought, one thing to ponder as they go about their day, what would it be?
I think it would be this. The law is not some distant, abstract concept. It's woven into the fabric of our lives, shaping our choices, our relationships, and our understanding of right and wrong. And as the Philippines continues to evolve, its legal system will undoubtedly continue to reflect those changes. So I encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking questions.
I love that. Keep asking questions. That's what the deep dive is all about. And who knows, maybe your questions will lead to a whole new deep dive, uncovering even more fascinating stories and insights.
Exactly. The journey of discovery never ends.
Well said. Until next time.
Until next time. All right, buckle up, everybody. We're diving deep into legal ethics today with a whole stack of recent Philippine Supreme Court rulings.
You know, these cases offer a fascinating look into the ethical challenges lawyers and judges face every day. Really gets you thinking about right and wrong.
Oh, for sure. And we've got it all. From disbarment complaints to notary publics gone rogue.
We'll examine not just the cases, but the court's reasoning behind their decisions.
Sounds like a plan.
Definitely.
Okay, so picture this. You hire a lawyer, right? Then decide to fire him. You want your acceptance fee back, but the lawyer refuses and things get a little crazy.
Uh-oh.
The guy actually files a disbarment complaint against the lawyer.
Wow. Using a disbarment complaint as leverage. That's the case of Jose P. Singh v. Perfecto S. Corpus. Raises some interesting questions.
So what happened? Did the court side with the disgruntled client?
Yeah.
What about the acceptance fee? Can you really get that back?
Well, in this case, the court actually sided with the lawyer. Found the complaint was filed with malicious intent. But here's the thing. They upheld the general principle that acceptance fees are non-refundable.
So even if you fire your lawyer before they've really done anything, they still get to keep that money. What's the logic there?
Well, you see, acceptance fees aren't just about paying for work already done. It's to compensate the lawyer for the time they spend evaluating your case, maybe turning down other clients to avoid conflicts of interest. Think of it like a reservation fee.
Makes sense.
You're reserving their expertise, ensuring both sides are serious.
I get it. Like booking a table at a fancy restaurant. You don't expect a refund just because you changed your mind and ate somewhere else.
Exactly.
So anyone thinking of hiring a lawyer, take note, be clear about those acceptance fee terms.
Absolutely. Get everything in writing.
Now let's talk about conflict of interest, a real ethical minefield.
Yeah.
Can a lawyer use info from one client to help another, especially if those clients are on opposite sides?
Tricky situation for sure.
That's exactly what happened in Keng Tae-sek v. Eddie, Alex Whitedan. A Korean national accused his former lawyers of using confidential info to file deportation complaints against him. Sounds like a serious breach of trust.
It does, but there's another legal concept at play here. The burden of proof. In disbarment cases, the burden is on the accuser. They need strong evidence.
Ah, so even if it seems shady, suspicion isn't enough.
Nope. Needs to be solid proof, clear and convincing evidence of that ethical violation. Disbarment's a serious matter. Got to be careful.
Gotcha.
Big consequences.
Okay, let's move on to the world of notary publics. These cases highlight how vital their role is and what happens when things go wrong.
Absolutely. They're not just folks with fancy stamps.
Right. They're responsible for verifying identities, making sure those legal documents are legit.
Big responsibility.
In heir of Hermenegildo A. Unite v. Eddie, Raymond P. Guzman, a notary notarized a deed of donation, even though one party was out of the country.
Wait, what?
Yeah, proven to be abroad at the time of signing.
Wow, that's a huge problem. Really underscores the importance of in-person identity verification.
Couldn't agree more.
Major consequences if that's not done right.
And then there's Spapis, Antonio, and Josefa Perlatan Viati, Maria Johanna and Vallejo. This time, a notary notarized a deed for her own uncle.
Big no-no. Clear conflict of interest. Notaries can't handle documents for close relatives.
Right. It's all about impartiality, public trust in the system. The notary has to be neutral, like a referee.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
So think about it, folks. How many times have you signed a notarized document without a second thought?
It's easy to take it for granted, for sure.
Now let's talk judges. We've got two cases that highlight the balance between judicial discretion and accountability.
Judges have a lot of power, but they're not above the law, right? Held to a high standard.
Absolutely. First up, Andrew Mbesa v. Marietta v. Santos. A judge was accused of misconduct because someone was unhappy with their judgment.
Happens sometimes, doesn't it? People don't like the outcome, so they cry foul.
Right, but the court made it clear that mere errors in judgment don't automatically equal misconduct.
Unless there's evidence of bad faith, some ulterior motive, or clear bias, it's not enough.
So what about a judge who messes up, not because of a bad decision, but because they're just inefficient?
Ah, like an OCAV judge Victor Teves.
Precisely. This judge was delaying cases for years, creating a huge backlog.
Wow, justice delayed is justice denied, as they say.
And the court agreed. They took disciplinary action, emphasizing that judges have a duty to be efficient to ensure timely justice.
Makes you think about the importance of a well-run courtroom.
Absolutely. So judicial discretion comes with responsibilities.
No doubt about it.
Okay, let's be real. Not every lawyer is a shining beacon of ethical behavior.
True enough.
We've got a whole stack of cases where lawyers were called out for misconduct. For example, Marilyn B. Montehermoso v. Romeo Patudo. A lawyer encouraged a lawsuit that was totally frivolous, dragging it on for years.
Talk about wasting time and money.
Right. This highlights a lawyer's duty to be honest with their clients, advise them about the risks and the likelihood of success. Sometimes the best advice is don't do it.
Sometimes walking away is the most ethical choice.
Totally agree. Then we have Miriam Tante Singh v. Aderi, Dennis C. Pangan. This lawyer filed a motion against his own client's interests without telling them, and then sent them nasty text messages when they questioned him.
That's just wrong on so many levels.
Talk about a violation of trust.
Lawyers have a fiduciary duty, putting their clients' interests first. This guy was acting like he worked for himself, not the people who hired him.
And the insulting texts. Come on, unprofessional doesn't even begin to cover it.
Communication should always be respectful, especially in a professional setting.
Then there's Corrado Abe Lopez Vietti, Arturo C. Mata, where a lawyer was caught notarizing documents without properly verifying the client's identity. And this wasn't his first offense.
A pattern of misconduct. Oh, boy.
The court saw this as a clear sign he couldn't be trusted.
Shows how those seemingly small procedural errors can add up.
Next up, Benjamin M. Katapunan Viadati, Rubena C. Carrera. This lawyer failed to inform his client about a Supreme Court ruling in their case.
Whoa, that's a big miss.
You'd think that's a basic part of the job, right? Keep your client informed.
Absolutely. That information can completely change the game plan.
Exactly. It's not just about doing the legal work. It's about communication every step of the way.
Couldn't agree more.
Finally, we have Damaso Stamaria v. Adedi, Ricardo Atedi. A lawyer heard a rumor that his client's case had settled and didn't bother to confirm it.
Oh, no. What happened?
He failed to file a crucial appeal brief, and his clients lost their case.
Ouch. That's the danger of hearsay.
Right. Don't believe everything you hear, especially in law. Always double-check, verify those sources.
Crucial. Never rely on rumors.
So we've seen lawyers making all sorts of mistakes, from neglecting their duties to acting unethically. But let's not forget about judges. They face ethical dilemmas too, especially when personal and professional lives get intertwined.
Right, like in Sampson v. Sinden v. presiding judge Rafael F. Alzot. This judge was reprimanded for not recusing himself from a case involving his wife.
Recusing himself.
Basically, stepping aside because of a conflict of interest to avoid any bias. In this case, the judge's wife was applying for a notarial commission, and guess who was presiding over the hearing?
You're kidding? Her husband?
Yep. He was in a position to decide on his wife's professional license. The court said even the appearance of impropriety is unacceptable.
It's about preserving public trust in the system, right?
Absolutely. People need to believe that justice is impartial, that decisions are fair. Even the perception of bias can damage that trust.
So judges need to be extra cautious, especially when family is involved.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our legal ethics deep dive. Seen lawyers and judges making some pretty big mistakes.
We have.
And learned some valuable lessons about ethical conduct in the legal profession. It's not always easy to navigate those gray areas.
Definitely not.
But we're not done yet. There are more fascinating cases waiting for us in part 2.
Oh, there are some real head-scratchers coming up.
Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get even more interesting.
You won't want to miss it. Welcome back. Ready for more ethical quandaries from the Philippine Supreme Court?
You bet. It's like legal drama, but with real-world stakes. What do we got today?
Let's dive into a case where a lawyer is accused of neglecting a client's case. Edgardo M. Morales v. Adii, Ramiro B. Borres. Client felt the lawyer wasn't doing enough, withholding info.
So it's not always cut and dry, huh? A client being unhappy doesn't automatically mean the lawyer's in the wrong.
Exactly. The court really scrutinized the lawyer's actions in this case and found he'd made reasonable efforts.
So what's the takeaway? How do we know when a lawyer's truly negligent, not just facing a demanding client?
It's all about context. You got to look at the complexity of the case, the lawyer's communication, any unexpected circumstances that pop up.
Makes sense. Kind of like judging a chef, right? Can't just taste the final dish. Got to consider the ingredients, the time pressure. Maybe there was a kitchen fire.
Perfect analogy. We're looking at the whole picture to see if the lawyer acted with the skill and diligence you'd expect from a competent attorney.
Speaking of diligence, let's go back to those notary publics. We saw how vital their role is, ensuring legal documents are kosher,
And how those slip-ups can have some serious consequences.
like in Librada e Ledgera v. Addy, Ramiro S. Osorio. This lawyer-turned-notary really messed up, notarizing documents for someone who was demonstrably out of the country.
You're kidding.
Plus a bunch of other notarial errors.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
And the consequences were severe. Revoked his notarial commission, suspended him from practice, banned him from ever being a notary again.
Wow. That's a cautionary tale if I ever heard one. Highlights the importance of accuracy, attention to detail in those seemingly simple notarial tasks.
For sure, those tasks are the foundation of a secure legal system.
It's like, think about it. Every time you sign a notarized document, you're putting your faith in that notary.
Like a seal of approval. Everything's legit, done by the book.
Exactly. They're safeguarding your legal rights.
Now let's switch gears. Explore those tricky situations where personal relationships and professional duties clash.
Always a recipe for potential ethical dilemmas.
The case of Samson B. Sinden v. Presiding Judge Raphael F. Alzide really underscores the importance of impartiality for judges.
No room for favoritism in the courtroom.
In this case, a judge was reprimanded for not recusing himself from a case involving his wife.
Oh boy. That sounds dicey.
His wife was applying for a notarial commission, and he presided over the hearing, even granted it.
So he was basically judging his own wife's qualifications.
Yep. The court made it clear. Even the appearance of impropriety is unacceptable. You got to maintain public confidence in the judiciary.
It's like that saying, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion.
Even if there's no actual wrongdoing, that perception of conflict can erode trust.
Absolutely. Judges need to be extra careful, avoid even the hint of bias, especially when family's involved.
Speaking of serious business, let's delve into disbarment cases. The ultimate sanction for lawyers who cross the ethical line.
Not something to be taken lightly. Shows a lawyer's unfit to practice.
In Addy, Pedro B. Aguirre v. Addy. Crispin T. Reyes, we see a laundry list of offenses. False claims, offensive language, even that sneaky forum shopping tactic.
Trying to find a court that'll favor your side. Not exactly playing fair.
This case highlights a couple of things about disbarment. First, they're sui generis, meaning they're unique and can continue even if the complainant dies.
So it's not about personal vendettas, it's about protecting the public and the profession's integrity.
Right. And secondly, the court differentiates between serious breaches that warrant disbarment and lesser offenses, like simple misconduct.
Degrees of severity, so to speak.
What happened in this case? Was it a disbarment situation?
This lawyer got nailed for simple misconduct for his language, but wasn't disbarred. The other accusations didn't have enough evidence.
So they really weigh the severity of the violation before dropping the hammer.
Absolutely. Disbarment is reserved for when a lawyer's actions show a fundamental lack of character, not just a single misstep.
For our last case, let's circle back to lawyer negligence. Seems like it's a recurring theme in legal ethics.
It's a complex issue, for sure.
The case of Edgardo M. Morales v. Addy, Ramiro B. Boris, teaches us about the nuances of those lawyer-client relationships.
Where things can get tricky.
The client accused the lawyer of neglecting the case, withholding info, but the court cleared the lawyer.
It's important to remember, just because you lose a case doesn't mean your lawyer messed up. There has to be proof of actual negligence.
So it's not about the outcome, it's about how the lawyer handled things.
Exactly. Did they act with the skill and care a competent lawyer would? That's what matters.
It seems like the court looks at a lot of factors, not just a simple win or loss.
They do. Communication, the complexity of the case, any unforeseen issues. It's about a fair assessment of the lawyer's performance.
Well, that wraps up part 2 of our legal ethics journey. What a whirlwind.
Hang on tight, we've got one more part to go with even more twists and turns in the world of legal ethics.
Welcome back, Legal Eagles. It's the final leg of our legal ethics deep dive.
We've explored quite a few ethical minefields, haven't we?
We have. Lawyers behaving badly, judges facing tough calls, even those notary publics getting into hot water.
Lots of lessons learned about what it means to act ethically in this profession. Sometimes it's not about black and white rules.
It's those gray areas where personal judgment and professional duties collide.
You hit the nail on the head. Ready to tackle our last batch of cases?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, so remember that notary public who kept making those mistakes. Librada e Ledgera v. Atteri, Ramiro S. Osorio.
Oh yeah, that one was a doozy.
Well, this case just goes to show that those seemingly basic notarial tasks, like Verifying identities, making sure the documents are done right, they're not trivial.
They're essential.
They are the bedrock of a trustworthy legal system.
This guy notarized for someone overseas, plus a bunch of other errors. It all adds up.
It does. He lost his commission, got suspended from practice, and a permanent ban from being a notary.
Wow. Talk about consequences.
Right. It underscores the importance of accuracy, even in those little details. Because think about it. Every time you sign a notarized document, you're trusting that notary.
It's like their stamp is a guarantee that everything's legit.
Exactly. They're protecting your legal rights.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Look at how personal relationships can sometimes complicate things.
Always a potential ethical minefield.
The case of Samson B. Sinden v. presiding judge, Rafael F. Elzat, is a great example. A judge failing to recuse himself from a case involving his own wife.
Uh-oh.
She was applying for a notarial commission, and he not only presided over the hearing, he granted it.
Wow. Talk about a conflict of interest.
The court didn't mess around. They reprimanded him.
Yeah.
Made it clear, even the appearance of impropriety is a no-go. You got to maintain public trust in the judicial system.
It's not enough to just be fair. You have to be seen as fair.
Absolutely. Even a hint of bias can damage that trust.
For sure. Judges have to be squeaky clean, especially when family's involved.
Okay, time to get serious. Let's talk disbarment cases. The big leagues of legal ethics violations.
The ultimate punishment.
In Addy, Pedro B. Aguirre v. Addy. Crispin T. Reyes, we have a lawyer accused of all sorts of things. False claims, offensive language, even that sneaky forum shopping.
Trying to game the system, find a judge they think will be sympathetic?
Not cool.
Not at all. This case reminds us of a couple of things. First, disbarment cases are sui generis, meaning they're unique.
They can continue even if the person who filed the complaint dies.
Right. It's not about personal revenge. It's about protecting the public, upholding the integrity of the profession.
And secondly, the court really looked at the severity of the ethical breach.
Is it disbarment worthy? Or something lesser, like simple misconduct?
So what happened in this case?
Well, the lawyer was found guilty of simple misconduct for his language, but not disbarred. The other accusations didn't have enough evidence.
Shows how seriously they take that disbarment decision. It's a big deal.
Absolutely.
All right, for our final case, let's revisit that tricky topic of lawyer negligence.
One more time, back into the fray.
In Edgardo M. Morales v. Atiki, Romero b. Borges, a client accused their lawyer of neglecting the case, withholding important information.
And what was the verdict?
The court actually cleared the lawyer. It's important to remember, just because a client isn't happy with the outcome doesn't automatically equal negligence.
You got to look at the lawyer's actions. Did they meet the standard of care?
It's not just about winning or losing.
Nope. It's about whether the lawyer acted competently, communicated effectively. The court takes it all into account.
Well, that concludes our legal ethics deep dive.
We made it.
What a journey. We've seen lawyers, judges, even notary publics facing all sorts of ethical dilemmas.
From minor slip-ups to major misconduct.
What do you hope our listeners take away from all this?
Ethics are the heart and soul of this profession. It's not enough to just know the law. You have to apply it with integrity, honesty, fairness. Every decision has ethical implications.
Those implications, it can be huge, affecting people's lives, their faith in the justice system.
It's a responsibility we all share, whether we're lawyers, judges, or just everyday citizens interacting with the legal world. We all have a part to play in upholding those principles of fairness and justice.
Well said. Big thanks to you for guiding us through this fascinating and sometimes bewildering world of legal ethics.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little entertaining.
And that you learned a thing or two about the importance of ethical conduct in the legal profession.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new topic.